There is a narrow stretch of water that controls a significant portion of the global economy. Not a continent, not a superpower, a corridor. The Strait of Hormuz. And right now, it is no longer just a shipping route. It is a battlefield. Iran has already changed the rules, restricting movement, allowing some ships through, stopping others. Not a full blockade. Something more dangerous. Selective control. And now, the United States is preparing to respond, not by reopening the strait, but by blocking Iran itself. Iran hasn't completely shut the strait because it doesn't need to. Instead, it applies pressure. Ships are slowed. Routes become uncertain. Insurance costs rise. A few vessels pass. Many hesitate. And that hesitation is enough to move global markets. Oil prices rise, not because supply is gone, but because access is no longer guaranteed. This is not a blockade. This is leverage. Closing the strait completely would trigger immediate escalation. So Iran uses a different model: disruption, fast attack craft, surveillance, intermittent interference. The goal is simple: create risk without triggering full retaliation. Because once strait becomes unpredictable, the system begins to strain on its own. You don't have to stop every ship. You just have to make every ship question the journey. The US response: a counter-blockade. Now the United States introduces a different kind of strategy, not just protection, but restriction. A counter-blockade. The objective is not to close the strait entirely, it is to isolate Iran within it. That means monitoring vessels entering and leaving Iranian ports, intercepting ships linked to Iranian trade, preventing revenue flow from oil exports. This shifts the battlefield from open water to controlled access. A blockade is not just ships sitting in the water, it is a system: detection, tracking, interception. US naval forces operate in layers: surveillance aircraft scanning movement, satellites tracking shipping patterns, warships positioned at key points. When a vessel is identified, it can be monitored, stopped, redirected, and if necessary, escalated. The focus is not random ships, it is Iranian trade, specifically oil, because oil is Iran's primary revenue source, and in war, revenue equals endurance. Cut that flow and you weaken the system behind the conflict. But this is not open ocean. The Strait of Hormuz is narrow, congested, highly sensitive, which means every action is visible, every movement is monitored. Every mistake escalates. The US must operate carefully because enforcing control in confined waters is very different from enforcing it globally. Why this is not a clean operation? A blockade sounds simple. In reality, it's complex because not all ships are equal. Some are clearly linked to Iran. Others are not. Some carry mixed cargo. Others operate under neutral flags. This creates ambiguity, and ambiguity creates risk because stopping the wrong vessel can trigger international backlash. This is not a unified operation. Some US allies hesitate. Others call for restraint. countries dependent on the strait want stability, not escalation. Even major powers emphasize one point: freedom of navigation. Because once that is compromised, everyone feels the impact. History shows what happens next. Blockades apply pressure, but they also expand conflict. From Napoleon's trade restrictions to Britain's blockade in World War I to modern disruptions in global shipping, the pattern is consistent. Economic pressure spreads beyond the target and often returns to affect the enforcer. This is where the real impact begins. Shipping slows. Insurance costs rise. Routes become unpredictable. And that affects oil prices, supply chains, national economies. Even countries far from the conflict feel the consequences because energy flows are global. For countries like India, the strait is critical. A large portion of energy imports pass through it. Any disruption means higher cost, slower delivery, increased inflation pressure, and that effect doesn't stay isolated. It spreads from fuel to transport to everyday goods. The US has the capability to enforce a blockade, but capability is not the same as control, because Iran still operates within the strait, using fast attack boats, coastal systems, persistent pressure, which means the US must enforce control under constant pressure. Now both sides are applying control. Iran restricts movement, the US restricts Iran. Two systems, same space. That creates overlap, and overlap creates friction, because when both sides enforce rules, the risk is not just disruption, it is escalation. So now the question changes. It's no longer can Iran disrupt the strait, or can the US enforce a blockade? The real question is, who controls the rules of movement in a space where both sides are enforcing control at the same time? Because in the Strait of Hormuz, control is no longer about dominance, it's about persistence. And when two sides refuse to step back, the outcome is never stable. And that leads to the next question. If both Iran and the United States are trying to control the same choke point, then what happens when control itself becomes the conflict?